Looking for a guaranteed way to create content that resonates with your audience? Start a podcast, interview your ideal clients, and let them choose the topic of the interview. Because if your ideal clients care about the topic, there's a good chance the rest of your audience will care about it too. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to the B2B Growth Show. We're here today with Brian Phillips, CEO at The Basement. Brian, how are you doing today, man?
Wonderful. Good morning.
Good morning. Hey, it's great to have you on the show, Brian. Really excited to dive into how some strategies that you guys have helped customers employ, integrating data and creative throughout the customer journey. I think, some strategies that you can share on using both of those together are going to be really helpful for our audience. Before we jump right into the content that you wanted to share today, Brian, I'd love to let our listeners know a little bit about you and the team at The Basement. So if you could share with us what you and the team are up to these days.
Sure. So The Basement, we're an Indianapolis marketing and advertising agency that focuses on integrating digital, creative, and media strategies for consumer brands, but also B2B companies. The company's been around for about 11 years. We've had some significant growth, and I think that we're riding the trend in advertising and marketing that is moving towards the integration of data. And we've had a lot of success, and ultimately, at the end of the day, our clients are having success. So we're driving real business impact with them, and that's what we set out to do.
Yeah. I love where these two meet. I sometimes call myself a little bit of an analytical nerd. I love digging into data, but I love good creative at the same time. So this is a topic that I'm excited to talk about. And I think, as you mentioned, getting this right, blending these two together in the right way can really yield a lot of results, just like you're talking about with some of your clients. So with that, I would love to jump right in. As we were talking a little bit offline, Brian, you were sharing some of the challenges that you're seeing customers face in this area of blending data and creative. And one of the first ones is just the complexity that exists today in the marketing world. Talk to us a little bit about, that complexity that you guys are seeing.
Yeah, I think one of the primary challenges we're seeing is just the number of channels. And I think a lot of marketers are dealing with this as well. And as the consumers are engaging with brands within a fragmented journey, and there's a lot of opportunities for them to engage via social, via the web, on premise, in store, there with sales teams. There's a lot of engagement points, and the consumers are looking for information in a variety of ways. So that just presents a lot of challenges that we're seeing, and specifically bringing a narrative across that. So how do you engage with a consumer from, let's say, the top of the funnel through some type of transaction or conversion, and have a clear and concise narrative? And that continuity across the channels is where we see a lot of challenges, and then we also provide a lot of value.
Yeah, I mean, the channel landscape is only getting more complex. You've got different social media channels, you've got different messaging channels, from chatbots to email to texting with clients, depending on what your sales team's methodology is. I mean, it's so varied, and being able to provide a consistent message across those channels can really be a challenge. The other thing we were talking about a little bit, Brian, was, you're seeing a lot with clients that with all these channels, one of the challenges is continuity of the message, but it's also just providing enough content in each of those channels. Once you've kind of figured out the complexity and figured out where your buyers are living, there's this disconnect of budget versus the content needs.
Yeah, absolutely. You nailed it. And where we're seeing, budgets, flat budgets, but greater needs for content. And that's both written, that's video, educational content. I think the consumers are doing a lot of research. They're doing a lot of pre-tailing before they make purchases, and brands need to support them and are having challenges just finding an opportunity from a budgeting standpoint to fulfill the content needs, but then also understanding the consumer enough. And this is where we start tapping into the data and the creative is the consumers engage with channels differently, and their expectations from a content and a creative standpoint are different. It's not just putting a 30-second TV spot out there and running it on TV and then blasting it through all your other channels and expecting the results. It's just the consumers are engaged differently, and the creative needs to adapt to that to the consumer, really.
Yeah, and that probably makes it even more challenging because the content needs are there across multiple channels. But to your point, you can't just take the same content and blast it across multiple channels.
Yeah.
What are you seeing where maybe some of your customers have successfully done that? Maybe they've started to scale up on one channel that they've really seen as crucial where their audience is living.
Yeah, I can give an example of, and this starts to get into more of the integrating the data and creative around. Yeah. We have a client who's in the CPG. They're a CPG client, but we also manage their co-op and their retail partnerships. And one of the keys, in our opinion, as an agency, is to build an infrastructure and to build when I say infrastructure, I'm talking about a data infrastructure across the entire marketing funnel. Okay. So looking at everything from awareness tactics all the way down to more of your intent tactics and getting into what we call destinations. So understanding where how the engagement point with the consumer, whether that be a website, whether that be in a retail location, whether that be on your social channels. Those are, in our world, those are destinations. Those are places that we're driving consumers to. And at the end of the day, we're trying to get to some type of transaction or conversion. So one of the things that we've found success is to build a data infrastructure throughout that funnel. So put yourself in a position to provide tactics or deploy tactics that extract the data that is necessary and that is important for you, but you must analyze it up and down the funnel. So if you're extracting information from your social channels and you're extracting information from your awareness level tactics, those need to be analyzed together. And I think a lot of times the analysis is siloed, and brands and marketers don't look up and down. And to your point about an example, one of the things that we did with a client that I thought was extremely successful was we deployed a programmatic display campaign, and we put out over 1,000 ads. But the ads were all varied. So this was for a door hardware brand. And the background, we had a series of ads that had different background images, different headlines, different door colors, different door hardware. And this is where we used AI and machine learning to auto optimize. So we deploy all these, and we try to extract from the market and the consumer, what brand do they want to engage with? What's driving engagement? And
based on those variables in the creative, right?
Exactly, based on those variables, so that we can start to see not necessarily what they're buying, because we're not trying to, ultimately we're trying to sell the product, but at this point we're trying to influence them to take action. So what's driving their action at this point? And we were able to extract a performance product mix that's driving engagement and reapply that when we were doing our TV buy. So we were working on a national TV campaign, and we finished the pitch, the creative, the direction was in place. And then it came down to what products do we use? And our starting point was that consumer truth of what is driving the engagement. And what was interesting about that is that that was not a product that was sold across their retail partners. This was something that wasn't the highest selling product. It was probably one of the lower selling products, but it got the consumer's attention and the consumer took action on it. So we wanted to use that at the top of our funnel because we knew from quantitative data that has driven action.
So I love that, kind of applying that theme that you mentioned earlier of taking data from one channel, applying it to another, not just looking at how do we continue to make this channel better, but taking the data and applying it to multiple channels. I definitely see how that, can provide some clarity to, the complexity of the multiple channels. I think that's a great example, Brian.
Today's growth story is about a computer software and hardware firm with a footprint of over 100,000 employees. This company was struggling to engage with partners across a variety of territories and sales focuses. So with a goal of penetrating white space accounts and growing their premier partner base, this company implemented a solution rooted in data intelligence and channel enablement to engage with over 400 partners. This resulted in 122% partner growth year over year, coupled with an MQL to SQL conversion rate of over 78%. So what was this magical solution that produced such amazing results? MRP Prolitics. MRP Prolitics is an insights-powered account-based marketing platform with streaming predictive analytics baked into its core. Integrating multi-channel ABM execution on these insights, MRP Prolitics triggers display, email, direct mail, and global inside sales in real time, helping the largest marketing departments in the world deliver the right message to their customers at just the right time. So could MRP Prolitics work for you too? There's a real good chance it could. Find out by visiting mrpfd.com or click the link in the episode description of this interview. All right, let's get back to the show.
You mentioned something that you guys do in creating a visual outline of your funnel architecture and kind of overlaying the data on top of that. I think that would be really valuable for you to share a little bit on with our audience here.
Sure. So this is a framework that we work with our clients around and building their strategy into. So it starts off with your influence. So your influence strategy. So how are we driving demand generation? And that falls into your typical awareness, consideration, and intent. And I mentioned earlier that drives to some type of destination. So within this framework, we look at the destinations as well and outline those. So we're looking at the website, we're looking at the retail locations, we're looking at all the places where your consumers are engaging. Can we extract information from your sales teams if that's applicable? And at the end of the day, that drives to some type of transaction. So we're actually working with brands now to see how that's driving performance. So we're getting POS data. We want to look at the POS data. And at the end of the day, we want to start with that POS data and work backwards. So we want to build a data infrastructure throughout all of this that allows us to extract what we need, but then visually allows the team to see exactly what we are anticipating or what we're trying to do from a consumer journey standpoint. So we all within our agency and with the client can collaborate around this framework to see the ideal consumer journey, the strategy, but then also the messaging and the narrative that gets integrated into this. And I'm of the opinion that from my team's standpoint, regardless of where you're working with a brand, whether you're on the design team or you're at the strategic level or you're a media buyer, is if we can all rally around the same strategy and understand and clearly understand the same strategy, it's going to gain efficiencies for our clients. It's going to gain efficiencies and effectiveness for us because we're able to understand the decisions that we're making with the consumer from a creative standpoint. We look at it of where's the consumer coming from and where are they going? And I think when you have those in and out points visible, it makes much more informed creative decisions.
Right. And visible to the whole team, not just creative, all the members of your team. Again, kind of going back to that point of you need some clarity through the complexity, and we're talking about that, from the outside, but now talking about, how do you do it internally as well? So those are all great points, Brian. And I love the story you shared in, taking data from one channel, applying it to another, and seeing that effectiveness because, obviously a completely different decision would have been made in that story had the data not really been applied. So that's great
absolutely.
stuff. Well, Brian, it has been a pleasure having you on the show. Really appreciate you sharing your thoughts on this topic. And I think our audience is going to get a ton of value from this. If they want to stay connected with you, reach out to you, any follow-up questions, what would be the best way for them to go about doing that?
Sure. They can reach us. They certainly can go see the website, thebasement.com, and I'm available and constantly on LinkedIn. So easy to connect with me there as well.
Awesome. Well, Brian, thanks so much. Before we let our audience go today, we want to remind you guys one more time, the Flip My Funnel conference is fast approaching, August 8th in Boston. We're getting really close. If you haven't gotten your tickets yet, we want to make sure you use this promo code to get 50% off the tickets you're going to buy for yourself or for your team. So that promo code is B2B Growth, just like the show name, the number 2, the letter B, growth, no hyphens, no spaces. So go to flipmyfunnel.com, use the 2018 conference link. When you go to get your tickets, use that promo code B2B growth to get 50% off. Part of our team will be there. We'll have a lot of past guests and a lot of our listeners, a lot of great marketing topics, a lot on account-based marketing. So looking forward to seeing you in Boston soon.
There are lots of ways to build a community. And we've chosen to build the B2B growth community through this podcast. But because of the way podcasts work, it's really hard to engage with our listeners. And without engagement, it's tough to build a great community. So here's what we've decided to do. We're organizing small dinners across the country with our listeners and guests. No sales pitches, no agenda, just great conversations with like-minded people. We'll talk business, we'll talk family, we'll talk goals and dreams. We'll build friendships. So if you'd like to be a part of a B2B growth dinner in a city near you, go to b2bgrowthdinners.com. That's b2bgrowthdinners.com. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.